Hello, everyone. How are we? Everybody feeling good? Feeling excited? The governor said, let's build, so I put on some work clothes. How about that? You are about to be blown away. Those of you who are in this room will not forget the next little bit. I brought this man out. He's Unqork CEO. His name's Gary Hoberman. What he's about to tell you and the things that he's working on will blow your mind. Please give him a Utah welcome. Gary Hoberman.
So with that, I have to blow your mind, and I'm going to do my best. We'll see. Thank you, Clint. This is an honor to be here with all of you and all the speakers who are amazing speakers on the stage. So my topic is jumping out of the C-suite to be an entrepreneur. Redefine software. Do something a little different. I'm hoping to challenge you not just with my learning through this journey, but also challenge you with a topic you probably don't think much about. And that is what happens after you build software, not about the build process. So I have to start with a little bit of going way back, the wavy lines. My dad was an entrepreneur, which meant I got to play on punch card machines and index my comic books. I got to play in Deckmates, and he had a publishing business. And I would go home for lunch and play on these computers, and it was a natural thing for me to communicate to a machine. I loved it. And I grew up doing that, but the other side to me was, if you saw me in high school, I was a sponsored skateboarder. And if you asked me in high school, it was, this is my career. Tony Hawk was not a video game. He wasn't yet well known. I was competing against him, losing badly. But that was kind of what and there's an aspect of skateboarding and entrepreneurship which are very similar. So what I was really good at was what called wall climbs, which is basically without a ramp, going straight at a wall and riding up and down it. And what it means is you have to go as fast as you can at that wall. And there is no stopping. There is no slowing down. And if you do, you go too slow and you're going to just hit the wall, and you hit the wall. But, the real world kicked in somewhere along the way, and I realized I needed to get a job. So I started going back to my skills in communicating to machines, programming, and I started building trading systems on Wall Street. So 1994, I'm going to age myself right here, and my goal was to see if I could use my skills in communicating to a machine to become a managing director, the top title at a bank, without ever moving, without all the politics, without violating my integrity. And my goal was to get that corner office, the window office, and I did. I did it at one of the youngest ages. I was at Citigroup, so it was Smith, Barney, Solomon City. It was a 16-year journey. And I remember when my mentor walked into that office and said, "This office is too good for you." That was what I remember. Was like, you don't deserve this, which was great. But it goes back to confidence, entrepreneur. And I wound up becoming a global CIO at another Fortune 50 company. And I was basically now managing 10,000 engineers, 47 countries, communicating with regulators and investors and public analysts, and it's a public company. And I thought that's what I dreamed of. That was what I wanted. That was me. That was I've achieved it. And the reality was, I was miserable. And what I saw was every day I was there, I was making the company worse. What a feeling to be I've achieved my goal, and I'm miserable, and the longer I stay, the worse the company becomes. So specifically, why was that the case? What was it that I was seeing? I was in Fortune magazine, Forbes. We were all over the news. We hired 2,000 more engineers in Raleigh, Research Triangle. It was all over. The reality was, every new application I built was this exciting, we're going to build this new thing. It's going to do this and this. And the reality was, the second it went live, my life was spent security issues, vulnerabilities, COB testing, DR testing, QA testing. We've got disaster recovery coming up. There's a technical debt we now incurred because we're using this product which is no longer valid. And eventually what I knew was that app that I built that I was proud of was going to go end of life. And what I realized was it wasn't just about that one app. It was every single app I was building was basically in a world where it could never, ever achieve the expected value the business set out for it. So, this is the reality of every company around the world and every government around the world, especially the federal government, which I'll talk about later. Specifically, what it means is the business says, we're going to invest in this to do this. Here's the return. Here's your savings. Here's your expenses. And the reality is when you launch your new application, it never meets the need. So you spend about a year pushing it up the hill, doing all of the security issues and performance issues and experience issues, and it looks great. And then what immediately happens is this. You basically are confronted with a world where every application, I owned 8,000 applications running in a data center, spending $2 billion a year. 80% of that $2 billion was here. It was just keeping the lights on. It was dealing with the security issues, dealing with the technical debt, dealing with performance issues and changes. Every Friday morning, I would get on a call and talk about outages for the previous week. And every Saturday and Sunday, I'd be paged or called and said, we tried to deploy a fix, it didn't work. We're going to pray it'll be ready for Monday. And the reality is the companies suffer. And I could tell you the companies I'm in were known as the world's best. So this was a problem I saw which I couldn't get out of my head. And it was something where I just felt like this gut punch to say, we got to do something about this. There has to be a better way to build software where you're left in a better state. And what's interesting as an entrepreneur, you get that punch and you can't ignore it. So what I did was I had to basically jump out of the C-suite, the corporate jet, and jump into Zone 5 United. And that's Zone 5 is kind of the last seat, is what that means. But the reality was, everyone thinks when I created the company almost 8 years ago, I was a CIO, of course, doing well, successful. I had the money to invest. The reality was, I decided to basically start the company in the midst of a divorce, which froze all assets, which meant I slept on the couch for the first 2 years, so my kids had bedrooms. I was credit card to credit card moving expenses around to meet the expenses needed. And the reason was I believed so much in this idea. I knew what needed to be done to fix the world of software. This is things that Microsoft doesn't see and Google don't see and Amazon. I'm like, this is new. This is something that we have to solve. And the reality was, I went back to all the investors that used to fly me out to the West Coast and pitch me their startups when I was CIO. And I went back to them with, I'm going to build a business. Here's what it's going to do. And what I basically heard was 300 no's within a period of 3 months. And each one of them, these are individuals, the names you know, the names in the news, each one of them basically had reasons. And I would always say, can you give me some constructive feedback? And what I heard was, I'm too old. I've been institutionalized. If I was 1 year in a company like Citigroup, there's no way I could be CEO. Like Shawshank Redemption, institutionalized with the initials. And the reality was, again, I had to stop there and say, I know what needs to be done. So I had to figure out how to build the company without the investment, self-fund it, with nothing, which meant I went back to my days of coding. And we started to build it from scratch. And the first version that went live was my code. We then took every quote that an investor said and put it on a wall. And this was actually featured in Entrepreneur magazine a few years back. It's kind of cool. That wall became the inspiration wall. And you'll see on the wall things like, you're too old. This isn't going to work. This will take years to prove out. The reality was we had clients signed within 6 months. Fortune 100 customers signed within 6 months. We had revenue before funding. And at that point, it basically meant we got to write our own term sheet. So what did we build? Well, the problem we were looking to solve was this. How do you create software for any industry? And what we did was we started with the most complex regulated industry, which is banking and insurance. We started with the most difficult problem, so it will work for everyone else. And specifically, when you look at that problem space, what we wanted to do was create a world where every application created is getting stronger by the second it's used. Stronger. If you think about an application, what I like to think about as an application is like a human. It's like, hey, it's launched, it's going to go face the world. The reality is the applications are kind of shriveled in the corner, hiding from hackers. And when you run a penetration test against one application, you tested one application. You didn't test the other 8,000 applications. So the world that we were creating was what we call a regenerative world. Regenerative, what it means to us is simple, which is it's a system, an adaptive learning system, in which every application ever created in the future is benefiting every application in the past and every application coming in the future. So specifically, the view was, how do you create software in which you never need to maintain it? How do you change your maintenance from 80% cost down to 20% easily? And the way you do that is you DNA sequence software into data. Remove the language. Languages were invented by humans. The machines don't understand languages. Machines understand binary. So specifically, this is a brand new class of applications, a new foundation, and we call it regenerative. We're hoping that takes off. That's what our customers have called it. We called it no code. We pioneered that. The research groups grabbed that and put that into the category with 25-year-old software. We called it codeless to say what it's not, like the horseless carriage. But we needed our customers to name regenerative, which is what it is. And the whole concept is, can you build software in which you never think about it again unless the logic changes? It's going to work. Now, what that means is it has to adapt to every single device. From the Samsung phone that folds to the Vision Pro. You should never think about a device again as a problem. You shouldn't think about frameworks like React and Angular. They're gone. There's no reason to think about any of that aspects. It's got to enable a development better than Agile. We use Agile. My customers use Agile, but I'm not a fan. Because all the important things in Agile get into the backlog. They never see the light of day. So in our world, what we enable is the designers could work in Figma and export those Figma designs directly to Unqork. There's no translation. The business could actually work not just on requirements, but they could go into the technology and side by side the engineer to build. And most importantly, the engineer only focuses on the hard stuff, not moving a button around the screen. They should actually focus on what's critical for them, what's the hardest algorithms to solve that no one solved before. I always like to say the laziest engineers are the best. They always look to see if someone else solved it before they try. That's who you want. It's got to be AI powered, which I'll talk about in a minute. And then the engine that powers this, the regenerative engine, it has to have unmatched security. So in our world, every time Goldman Sachs, who's a customer, runs penetration tests against Unqork, they're penetration testing every customer. The next day, maybe the US State Department's a customer today. They're running pen tests. We're in a world where our code base, which is the same code base across every customer, across every cloud, it's being continuously tested, performance tested, load tested, constantly. And they're all testing the same code, which means I've seen vulnerability reports with 0 defects. We've seen code with 0 defects. And it just means that you're suddenly getting a scale play which reinvents the cost structure and gets you compounded strength. So this is our picture today. Our picture is simple. It's how do you shift your costs from maintenance to innovation? That's the problem that was in my head when I was CIO. All I kept saying was, how do I take 80% of that $2 billion spend every year and put it to something meaningful for the company? And this is what we enable. And specifically what it means is our team codes. Yes, there's code. My team codes. I have the best engineers. They're coding constantly. But the code base that they're running is basically single tenant instance across every customer, replicated across every customer, without the ability to override or change it or inject anything, which means every customer is on the same line of code. Imagine, in companies like Citigroup, I couldn't even get 2 departments using the same code base. Imagine all the banks using the same code for the first time in history. They're all benefiting each other. There's no more variety. They just focus on what's unique in the business value that they need to drive. So when we look at Unqork in the 8-year journey, we went from self-funding to a seed round, and we went to Goldman Sachs led our Series A, Capital G Alphabet led our Series B, BlackRock led our Series C. That was almost 5 years ago today. That's the last round we did. And at that round, we hit the $2 billion value mark. And we look at our success, though, based on customers. So we have 7 of the top 10 global asset managers with COEs building. We have 5 of the top 10 banks and 5 of the top 10, half of the best life and P&C, global wealth managers, global banks. The coolest thing was when COVID happened. So I'll never forget March 5th, there was no masks. I had my kids in the city in my office with me, which I think is so important to bring them into work, get them. And we got a call from the NYPD commissioner saying, COVID's coming in New York City, it's coming hard. How quickly can your software give us the contact tracing system for 20 million tri-state residents? And 80 of my employees came in that Saturday and Sunday. And by Monday, it was production, tested on Tuesday with vulnerability assessment, performance tests. And Wednesday, the mayor announced it and used it. The coolest thing was we delivered 40 million food orders. So we rebuilt Seamless Web in 5 days from scratch. The entire company we rebuilt in 5 days without a line of code. And it delivered 40 million orders through that system with no issues. And to me, the public sector side is probably the most interesting. If anyone's being married in New York City, it's us. We're capturing your proof of residence, your birth certificates. We're issuing the marriage license. We replaced COBOL. In 5 days, we replaced the entire system of record of COBOL, which is kind of cool from a time point of view. It means anything's possible. And specifically, I want to just show you one quick aspect of what's coming. AI to us is super exciting because our entire system is based on data. Imagine a world where you have a requirements document, you have a Git package, you have a business document, you have Figma screens. This is a public JavaScript library called Product Catalog. We're just going to go into Unqork, and we're just going to reference the URL to that Git package, the repository, the requirements. Literally, Unqork, using GenAI, is going to interpret those requirements into what a system might look like, what are the screens, what's the fields, what's the logic, and clicking another button, you've built the application. Now, what's different about this than any demo you've seen online about, hey, in 5 minutes, I could now build my code, or Copilot helps me, or Claude, or OpenAI. What's different about this is there's not a line of code. This application that's built is more secure, more scalable, more reliable, more performant, and never needs to be touched again. So you just focus on the business logic, and it exists. And this application will dynamically adapt to anything coming in the future. Devices change, holographic devices. That's my problem, not yours. So with that, I did want to say, the skateboarding vision I started with is still what I dream about. That's me in the office right before we moved in, 300 employees. And this is 2019. I still snowboard, by the way. So the one thing for 35 years, and that's exciting to come here, is snowboarding. But you need that vision. You need that ability to go straight at the wall, knowing you might hit it, knowing it's going to freaking hurt. But you need to be able to believe in yourself and that vision, be uncomfortable, and go up the wall and drive it. So to me, this is still where I am. I am absolutely today in the company in founder mode more than anything else I do. I see the potential where I could confidently state we could reduce half the costs in the federal systems and government. Easy. Every application migrated to us, we know is at least 50% of the costs ongoing permanently forever. Like, that's a huge statement to be able to confidently make. We have 5,000 mission-critical applications that have gone through that process, which gives me the confidence to say it. And we have 1.5 billion API calls just recently done last quarter. So the scale is actually increasing, security is increasing. And number one thing I would say is, believe in yourself. I'm on LinkedIn. You should feel free to reach out, find me. I'm always happy to talk. And like, when you have that vision in your head and you can't get it out, tackle the wall. Just go for it. Don't care what anyone says. Don't listen. If you know that that's the way forward. And I've got 4 kids, and they are each going to be entrepreneurs because they each go through this experience. So you have to share. And thank you again, everyone. Hopefully I did get some thought process going, and thank you for your time. Thanks.